Okay, so you've handed me this pretty hefty stack of articles all about cybersecurity and AI. Looks like we're in for a really interesting deep dive today.
Yeah, it's quite a mix actually. News articles, some in-depth analyses, even a few pieces that are well, let's just say they have some pretty strong opinions.
That's what we're here for, right?
Shit.
To cut through all that noise and give our listeners the key takeaways. So,
Yeah.
why don't we jump right in? This IBM report on cyber attacks in the manufacturing sector. I mean, that's going to be top of mind for you, right?
Oh, absolutely. And this report, it doesn't sugarcoat anything. Attacks on manufacturers, they're not just becoming more common, they're also getting way more expensive. The average cost of a data breach in manufacturing has jumped to, get this, $5.56 million. It's an 18% increase from just last year.
18%. Wow, that's a huge jump. Why are these attacks on manufacturers so costly? I mean, is it just because they're bigger targets?
It's actually more about the way manufacturing works, the nature of it. These companies, they can't afford any downtime, any disruption to operations. It has a massive ripple effect. Just think about a car factory. Every minute the production line is stalled, they're losing something like $22,000.
Ouch. Yeah, that adds up fast. So I can see why ransomware attacks would be a huge problem for them. Hackers, they know they can basically hold these companies hostage and demand big ransoms.
Exactly. And it's not just about the immediate financial hit. There's also the risk of losing intellectual property. Those designs, trade secrets, all the stuff that gives a company its edge. That kind of information, it'd be incredibly valuable to competitors, even foreign governments.
So it's not just about protecting data, it's about protecting their whole operation. Every minute counts.
Exactly. And then you add in the whole supply chain issue, right? You've got these complex networks of suppliers, and if just one of them gets compromised, well, the whole system is at risk.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like a chain reaction. And what about all these internet-connected devices popping up in factories? Aren't those potential entry points for hackers, too?
Absolutely. The Internet of Things, the IoT, it's creating a ton of new opportunities for cybercriminals. Every connected device, sensors, robots, whatever, it's a potential weak spot if it's not secured properly.
So we've got ransomware, we've got intellectual property theft, we've got supply chain risks, we've got the explosion of IoT devices.
Yeah.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It really is. And that's where AI comes in. It's kind of a double-edged sword when it comes to cybersecurity. On the one hand, it has the potential to make things way more secure. But on the other hand, it can also be used to launch much more sophisticated attacks.
Right, it's like they say, the only thing that stops a bad guy with technology is a good guy with technology.
Exactly. Take Apple, for example. They've actually done something pretty bold. They've opened up the code for their private cloud compute environment. They're basically inviting researchers to trip and hack it.
Is that some kind of PR stunt?
Not at all. They're dead serious about security. They're even offering rewards, bounties, up to $1 million for anyone who can find flaws in the system.
Wow. $1 million. But why are they going to such lengths?
They're trying to build trust. They get it. They understand that processing data in the cloud, especially with AI, it's the future. But it has to be done with privacy and security baked in from the start. By being transparent and inviting scrutiny, they're showing how committed they are to security and hopefully encouraging other companies to do the same.
So Apple is using AI to try and create a more secure environment. But what about the other side of the coin? How can AI be used by the bad guys to launch more sophisticated attacks?
Well, researchers have already figured out some pretty clever ways to trick AI systems. There's this technique called deceptive delight, where you basically slip in malicious queries along with harmless ones. It takes advantage of the fact that these AI chatbots have, well, limited attention span, you could say.
So you're tricking the AI into letting its guard down?
Exactly. And then there's another technique called confuse pilot. Attackers can poison the data environment with, say, a document that seems harmless, but actually contains malicious code.
That's kind of scary. It sounds like we're only just starting to understand the potential dangers of AI.
Absolutely. As AI keeps getting more advanced, the ways to attack and defend are going to keep evolving too. It's a constant back and forth. But here's the key takeaway for you. Even these big, well-known platforms, they're not immune to these attacks.
So how do we even begin to protect ourselves in this constantly changing landscape? What are some things we can do proactively?
Well, two terms that keep popping up in these articles are secure by design and secure by default. They might sound like just buzzwords, but they're really important concepts.
Okay, let's break those down for our listeners. What do they actually mean, and why should we care?
So secure by design, it's all about building security into the very core of a system right from the start.
So not just like putting a bandage on it after something bad happens.
Exactly. You want to use tools and technologies that are going to minimize those vulnerabilities right from the ground up. Like if developers use memory-safe programming languages like Rust, that can actually eliminate whole categories of vulnerabilities.
That makes sense. It's like building a house with a strong foundation, right? If the code's solid, it's a lot harder for someone to break in.
Exactly. Think of secure by design as minimizing the attack surface before it's even there.
Got it. Okay, so what about secure by default? Is that just a fancy way of saying things should be secure right out of the box?
That's a pretty good way to put it, yeah. Secure by default means that those highest security settings, they should be turned on automatically. The user shouldn't have to go through a bunch of complicated steps to get that basic level of protection.
So no more of those default passwords that are like ridiculously easy to guess. We've all seen how those can lead to huge data breaches.
Exactly. Secure by default is about making the secure choice the easy choice. And it's about making security simpler for everyone, not just the tech experts.
Right, because let's be real, most people aren't going to spend hours tweaking their settings. They just want things to work, and they want them to be secure without having to think about it too much.
Exactly. And a good example of secure by default in action is the rise of single sign-on, SSO. It's way more convenient. You only need to remember one password. But it's also more secure because there are fewer places where things can go wrong.
SSO, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It's simpler for the user and more secure overall. Win-win. So we've got secure by design, secure by default. Are these ideas only for developers, or are they something that everyday users should be thinking about too?
Oh, they're absolutely relevant to everyday users. When you're choosing a new app or an online service, think about the company behind it. What's their track record on security? Have they been open about any past incidents? Do they seem to embrace these principles, secure by design and secure by default?
That's a really good point. We should be asking these questions and holding these companies accountable for their security practices. But even with the best tech in place, things can still go wrong, right? This article about Riverview Health, it's a perfect example of how human error can lead to a major security breach.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In that case, just one single email account got compromised, and it led to a data breach that could have affected thousands of patients. It's a reminder that we're often the weakest link in the security chain.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that no matter how fancy our tech gets, we still need to be aware of human error. So what can we do to minimize those risks, the risks from human error?
Well, one big thing is that companies need to invest in security awareness training for their employees.
Huh?
And it's not just about teaching them how to create strong passwords or avoid phishing emails. It's about building a culture of security.
So it's about making everyone understand that security is everyone's responsibility, not just something for the IT department to worry about.
Exactly. But it goes beyond just individual responsibility, too. There's also this growing call for more radical transparency from the tech companies themselves.
I've definitely noticed that theme in a lot of these articles. What does that kind of transparency actually look like in practice?
It means going beyond just checking off boxes.
Right.
It's about showing a real commitment to security. Things like making vulnerability information public, offering bug bounty programs to encourage ethical hacking, and being open about security incidents and their practices in general.
So it's about building trust by being upfront about the challenges and the successes.
Exactly. And that kind of transparency, it can actually help raise the bar for security across the whole industry.
Okay, so we've talked about threats to manufacturers, the double-edged sword of AI, and the importance of human factors. But there's one more topic we got to dig into. Facial recognition. Meta's announcement that they're bringing back, that's creating a lot of buzz.
Yeah, and for good reason. It's a technology that brings up a lot of questions about privacy, the balance between security and privacy. Meta's saying it's all about security, helping to fight scams and recover accounts.
But didn't they shut down their facial recognition system a couple of years ago because of all the privacy concerns?
They did, yeah. And when they say, and I'm quoting here, we won't always get it right, that doesn't exactly inspire a ton of confidence, does it? Makes you think, where do they draw the line? And where do you draw the line?
That's the real question, isn't it? We're talking about biometric data here. Think about all the apps you use every day. Are you comfortable with them having access to your face, to that data? It's tricky. On one hand, it could make things more convenient, maybe even more secure. But on the other hand, it could really erode our privacy and give these companies even more power.
It's that classic tension between convenience and control. And it's a conversation that's only going to get more intense as facial recognition gets more advanced and more widely used. What's important is that we, as users, are aware of what we're giving up, the trade-offs, and make informed choices about how much privacy we're willing to sacrifice.
Okay, so facial recognition is definitely something to keep an eye on. But for now, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about some of the steps, the proactive steps that both companies and individuals can take to improve their security.
One of the big ideas we keep seeing in these articles is this idea of shifting the balance when it comes to cybersecurity risk.
Shifting the balance, what does that mean exactly?
It's about moving away from that old reactive approach to security, where you just wait for something bad to happen and then try to fix it. We need to be more proactive.
So being ready for the threats before they even show up.
Exactly. And that involves thinking about the tech, the organizational strategies, and the human element.
So it's more than just firewalls and antivirus software these days.
Right. It's about how people use technology, where the vulnerabilities are in those interactions. It's about having that security mindset at every level, from the CEO down to the interns.
Okay, that makes sense. So what are some specific things that companies can do to shift that balance, to tip it in their favor?
Well, we've talked about secure by design and secure by default. Those are essential. But it goes beyond that. For example, secure coding practices are super important. Developers need to know how to write code that's less likely to have vulnerabilities in the first place.
So it's like building a house with good quality materials and knowing how to put them together properly. If the code is solid from the get-go, it's harder for someone to break in.
Exactly. And there are actually tools that can help with this. Static analysis tools, they can scan the code for potential problems. Dynamic analysis tools, they test the software in a real-world environment.
So you need talented developers, but you also need the right tools and processes in place.
Absolutely. And it's about constantly looking for ways to improve. Security, it's not a one-time thing. It's a process.
It's got to keep evolving as the threats evolve.
Exactly. And part of that evolution is realizing that the old way of thinking about security, that castle and moat model, it just doesn't cut it anymore.
You mean just building a wall around your network and hoping that's enough? Yeah, that doesn't seem very effective these days.
Nope, it's outdated, especially now that everything's moving to the cloud. Data is everywhere. It's accessed from all these different devices. We need a more flexible approach, something that adapts and something that accounts for the human factor.
Right, because at the end of the day, your systems are only as secure as the people using them.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the importance of security awareness training for employees. It's about teaching people about the different types of threats, how to recognize them, how to protect themselves and their organization.
So it's more than just knowing how to create a good password or clicking the report phishing button?
It's about understanding how these attacks work, the psychology behind them, And it's about creating a culture where people feel comfortable speaking up if they see something suspicious without feeling like they're going to get in trouble.
That makes a lot of sense. We need to encourage people to say something if they see something, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about secure coding, continuous improvement, the human element. What are some other practical things that organizations can do to beef up their security?
One area that often gets overlooked is vulnerability management.
Vulnerability management. What exactly is that?
It's about having a system in place to find, assess, and fix vulnerabilities in your systems and software. It should be systematic.
So it's more than just waiting for a security update and installing it.
Yeah, it's about actively looking for those weaknesses, those vulnerabilities, figuring out which ones are the most urgent, and then taking steps to fix them before someone can exploit them.
So you're basically playing offense instead of defense, trying to find those weak spots before the bad guys do.
Yeah, exactly. It's being proactive, not reactive. And there are tools that can help with this too, like vulnerability scanners and frameworks for assessing risk.
Okay, so vulnerability management, it's all about being proactive and staying one step ahead. But what happens if, despite our best efforts, something does get through?
That's where incident response planning comes in.
So you're talking about having a plan for what to do if a security incident does happen.
Exactly. A good plan will spell out the steps to take, how to communicate, who's in charge of what. It's like having a fire drill, but for your IT systems.
I like that analogy. So everyone knows what to do, who to call, and how to contain the damage.
Exactly. And it's not just about having the plan. It's about practicing running those drills so everyone knows what to do when it's the real deal.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like knowing your escape route in case of a fire. Okay, so we've got vulnerability management, incident response planning. Anything else?
One more really crucial area is securing the software supply chain.
The software supply chain, what does that even mean?
It's about recognizing that software is rarely built entirely from scratch these days. Most software uses third-party libraries, different components, open source code, And if those components are compromised, well, it creates vulnerabilities in the final product.
It's like a domino effect. One weak link can bring down the whole thing.
Exactly. So it's really important to have a process for vetting all that third-party software, making sure it meets your security standards.
So we need to be careful about where we get our software and who we trust, right?
Absolutely. And it's not just about where you get it from, it's about how you manage it once you have it. One important step is to create what's called a software bill of materials, or SBOM.
A software bill of materials. That sounds like something you'd get at Home Depot.
It's actually a great analogy, just like a bill of materials for, say, a piece of furniture. We'll list out every part that went into making it, and SBOM lists out all the software components that make up a particular piece of software.
Okay, I get it. But how does an SBOM actually help with security?
By having that list, that detailed understanding of everything that's in your software, you can identify potential vulnerabilities more easily. And if something does go wrong, you can track down the source of the problem much faster.
So it's like having a map of your software so you can see where all the weak points are.
Exactly. And that can help you respond more quickly and efficiently if something bad does happen.
So an SBOM is kind of like a security checklist for your software.
You could think of it that way, yeah. It's a really useful tool for managing the complexity of software these days and reducing the risks that come with the whole software supply chain.
Okay, so SBOMs. Got it. What else can organizations do to secure their software supply chain?
Another key step is to set really clear security requirements for any third-party software they use. Don't just settle for whatever. Set the bar high and make sure the vendors are meeting those standards.
So we shouldn't just blindly trust any software we download or use.
Exactly. Do your homework. Look for vendors who have a good track record, who are open about vulnerabilities, and who are quick to provide security updates.
It sounds like securing the software supply chain is a pretty complicated thing.
It can be, yeah. But it's absolutely essential in today's world where so much software relies on all these different components.
Okay, so we've covered secure coding, incident response, the software supply chain, vulnerability management. There is a lot to think about when it comes to cybersecurity. It can be kind of overwhelming.
It definitely can be. But the good news is there are a lot of resources out there to help organizations improve their security no matter how big or small they are.
Like what? Where should people start?
One really great resource is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. Their website is a goldmine of information, guidance on all kinds of topics, secure by design principles, vulnerability management, incident response, and a lot more.
And they're the ones who are really pushing for this shift in the balance idea, right?
Exactly. They're leading the way on this issue and giving organizations the tools they need to improve their security.
So CISA is a good place to start. Any other resources you'd recommend?
There are also a bunch of industry groups and nonprofits that focus on cybersecurity, like NIST, the SANS Institute, ISACA. They offer training, certifications, best practices, all kinds of helpful stuff.
So there's a lot of support out there for organizations that are serious about security.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, cybersecurity, it's not just an IT issue, it's a business issue.
Right. Because a security breach can really hurt a company, their reputation, their finances, their whole operation.
Exactly. So organizations, they need to have a strategy, a comprehensive plan that covers every part of the business. Technology, people, processes. It's got to be holistic.
Okay, so we've explored a lot of different aspects of cybersecurity in this deep dive, but we've really only scratched the surface.
That's true. Cybersecurity is a constantly evolving field, always something new to learn.
Well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break to gather our thoughts. We'll be right back to wrap up our deep dive into this ever-changing world of cybersecurity. Welcome back to our deep dive into cybersecurity, especially in the age of AI.
It's been quite a journey going through all these articles.
You know, one thing that's really become clear to me is that cybersecurity, it's not just an IT issue anymore. It's not something that just the tech people need to worry about.
It's really woven into every part of our lives, right?
Uh-huh.
From the phones we use to the websites we visit.
And with AI becoming more and more powerful, all those connections, they're only going to get more complex.
Which means it's even more important for everyone to understand the basics, how to stay safe online.
Absolutely. We need to understand the threats, where those vulnerabilities are, and what we can do to protect ourselves.
That's a great start, but it also goes beyond just individual actions, you know.
Right. We need to hold these companies accountable, the ones that collect and use our data.
Demand more transparency, push for better security practices, make sure privacy is built in from the beginning.
Like with that whole facial recognition debate, is it really about security or is it just another way for them to track us?
Tough question. No easy answers there. But it shows how important it is to have these conversations, to talk about the trade-offs we're making.
Because security, it's not just about protecting our data, right?
It's about protecting our privacy, our freedom, our trust in this whole digital world.
So what does this all mean for our listeners? What are the key takeaways from this deep dive?
Stay informed, be proactive, and demand better from the companies that control so much of our online lives.
Know the risks, take steps to protect yourself, and speak up if something doesn't seem right.
Cybersecurity isn't a one-time thing. It's a constant process.
We need to be vigilant, adapt to new threats, and never stop asking questions.
Here's something to think about. Even Apple, a company known for its security and privacy, they're admitting their systems aren't perfect. They're inviting people to try and find those flaws.
So if even Apple is doing that, what does it say about the rest of the tech world? How can we, as users, push for more accountability, more transparency from these companies?
Those are questions we all need to be asking as we move forward in this age of AI.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive for today, but the conversation doesn't end here.
Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a safer, more secure online world.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.